One. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are starting a new segment with Michael Gaio, who presented to us last week at last Friday's Block Party on Mythos, creating a new story for humanity. Michael, what have you got in store for us this week?
Thanks, Jamin. Following last week was pretty extensive. I told one of my own personal stories and described what I'm working on with Mythic Systems and and the significance of creating a new narrative in the time we're in right now. And there's just so many directions we could go, and I have so much more I could share. Though this week I thought I would just narrow it a bit, given that I am under a little pressure today. I'm preparing for a workshop tomorrow. I'm doing a test of the Mythic Path program tomorrow here at my house. It's just a couple people to test it out. So getting that ready. So I thought I would take that opportunity, make it meaningful and just really focus in on one thing I thought could be useful, especially at the beginning for having an ongoing conversation around story and myth in this context of collective intelligence and the transition we're going through as a collective. That I think the first thing that came to mind is to share a resource that's not mine. It's a website called greattransitionstories.org. And I thought I would just share this because it's been an inspiration to me for many years. One of the founders is Dwayne Elgin. Does anyone here know who Dwayne Elgin is? Nope. Yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. He's written a couple books, and let me tell a story about Dwayne. So he's probably in his 70s or 80s by now. Dwayne, his story, I met him in the year 2000, and his story is that in 1970, Dwayne was working for the U.S. government in Washington, D.C. I believe it was there in Washington, and he was either a consultant or working for some institute there, doing research for the government on what the conditions of the planet would be in the year 2000, right? So 30 years ahead from 1970. And so he spent like a year or two doing this research, and what he found was just shocking. It really woke him up, because he was thinking, wow, in the year 2000, things are going to be looking kind of tight and troublesome, especially on certain vectors of global population and financial imbalance and social inequality, pollution, things like this. All the charts were just going like, projected to be going like this. And he saw this early on, in 1970, when it wasn't that lucid of a realization for the whole collective. So, based on that job, he then, from the results of that, he decided to quit doing that and kind of go off on his own independent path to do something about this. So, he's been working on that now for, 30 to 50 years. And so he's been somewhat of a, an activist of sorts. And he's written several books, and he speaks at conferences and stuff like this. And he made this, he was one of the founders of this website, which I'll show you here in a moment. But another great story about Dwayne, I'll tell you. So I had met him in the year 2000. He came to me. He had received some funding from the Institute of Noetic Sciences and the California Institute of Integral Studies, and he came to me. I was just a budding web designer then, working primarily in Flash, doing a lot of data visualization early on. This is like the year 2000, very, very early. And for this kind of application, and he came to me and he hired me to create really what was probably one of the first interactive maps to go on the internet. And it displayed all this information he was talking about. It was kind of this interactive interface where you could see all the different data of population and connectivity of the internet, and all these things on a timeline. And so it was this way of communicating this idea. in a way that people could kind of really play with and tweak that is probably pretty common today. But then it was a very, very novel thing to do. And that was one of my first web clients working with him that way. And that's how I met him in the year 2000. And then also we worked together on a few different projects over the next 10 years or so. And then I have one of my favorite memories of him was in 2009. I was living in San Rafael, California, just north of San Francisco, and he had an office in San Rafael. And one day I went by to visit him at his office. We were just going to chat. He was a bit of a mentor for me. And I come into his office, and he's like hunched over his computer, just really inspired and typing away on something. And you could see he's just really into his work. And he turns to me and says hello. And he says, Michael, I ask him, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm working on my new book. I think it was called A New Earth or something like this. It's now published. And he says he's been working on it for 30 years, this book. And he tells me, and this is something I'll never forget. Dwayne tells me, he was, Michael, let me give you some advice. If you're going to choose to do something in life, make sure it's something that will take at least 30 years to accomplish. That's how really great things are done. And I remembered that. And it's true. The thing I'm working, much of the projects I'm working on in Mythic Systems right now is, going back at least 20 years, maybe even 30. So something to keep in mind. They're really great projects often do happen that way. But I'll always remember that advice. Really good guys. So let me do a screen share here. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we see great transition stories.
Yeah, so this is at greattransitionstories.org. And again, this website's been around for, I would say, at least 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years or something like this. And Dwayne's one of the co-founders of it. And again, it's just there's not that many websites out there like this. I think this was the first one to do anything like this, of just becoming, a central hub for providing, new stories and new perspectives for all of us, at this time of great transition. So let me just bring up some notes here. Let me just grab them real quick. So I'll just read from this. These are times of great transition. Where do we begin when we can't see ahead? Which path will we choose? How will we know? What do we need to make the journey a success? Here are vital stories that can guide us as we co-create humanity's path forward. So there's a lot of resources on this website. I invite all of you, anyone who's interested, just go check it out. There's all kinds of stuff here. But we can go look at the core principles is a good place to look before we dive into some of the stories. So here's some assumptions that you say, we hold these truths to be self-evident. The first principle is that we are in a great transition, right? Where many systems and ideas that have been in place are beginning to change. I think all of us here could agree with that. The second principle is that we're in a living universe. That part of the transition we're going through is not just that. It's not just on, not just with our Earth-like systems, but it's also a transition of perspective, that we're really looking at where we live and the reality we live in, the universe we live in a much different way than what we've been doing for decades or centuries or even millennia about what the universe is. We live in a much more intelligent universe than we previously thought. The next principle is that we're biocosmic beings. our identity is immeasurably larger than our biological selves. Basically, that there's much more to being human than also what we think. So it's also a transition of who we are and how we understand who we are. And the fourth principle is that of conscious evolution, which is basically just saying that we have choice. We can participate more than what we're used to, that evolution is participatory. It's also limited. We can't always choose and get what we want, but I think that evolution is a lot more participatory than we previously thought it is, and we can consciously co-create with how things change from now on. And so the other area on the website that's a really good resource is these patterns of change, and these are the great stories of transition. So again, these are just like a collection of kind of like, certain patterns that we can frame the transition on. And I imagine that most of us here are probably familiar with at least most of these, if not all of them. But it's a good reminder. It's something that it's just good to have this resource that we can point other people to also. If people are getting too pessimistic or need some framing that we're in some kind of unfolding process towards a positive outcome, this could be the place. And so the first one, each of these opens up to a whole page with branching off into different variations of the theme. But birthing is just this general metaphor that we're really a young species. Honestly, we're just starting out, and maybe we're just going through these birth pains, so to speak, and we're really about to become something that is quite different than what we were before. The second one is the pattern of growing up, that we can frame our transition that we've already been born, or where are we at in the gestation process? Are we not born yet? Are we already born? Are we a toddler, teenager? I would think we're probably something like a teenager, maybe in this frame, a bit rambunctious and kind of like testing our power out. Really, really kind of randy, coming into puberty a little bit, making mistakes, still maturing. The next one is initiation. This one I like a lot. I'm just going to read this one. So the hero's journey of separation, initiation, and return can be expanded from the scale of an individual to the scope of the entire human community. When we step back and look at the human journey, it is evident that for thousands of years we have been on a path of separation. So that's referring to, Joseph Campbell's monomyth map of the hero's journey, which really has a lot of consistency. And if that's true, if we're in separation, then I think we've got good news ahead. If we've been in separation. The next one is metamorphosis. Similar to birthing, the story of how the caterpillar transforms into the butterfly has long been used as a metaphor for the process of transforming states of consciousness from one dimension to another, from knowing something on the surface, then undergoing a deep experience that leads to a whole new capacity and perception. So I love, this one of the butterfly is really cool, especially one particular aspect of that metaphor is that relates to actual scientific fact of how a caterpillar metamorphizes into a butterfly, is that after it goes into chrysalis, it basically completely dissolves in chrysalis state, becomes something like a gooey liquid. And then there's these cells called imaginal cells that generally hold the blueprint for the butterfly in it. And so those imaginal cells then help orchestrate and reorganize the gooky mush to become this new organism called the butterfly. And I think the parallel that metaphor to what's happening in our collective transformation right now, most of the world is a gooey mush right now, maybe even getting a little bit mushier to come. But there are imaginal cells like this group, who are fully passionate and focused on creating these new ways of, we're holding these new blueprints and new ways of organizing, so we can become this new species. Okay, the next one, two loops. This is one I hadn't heard before, and I was just reading about it before our call. So not necessarily a story, it's more of just a systemic pattern. And this is a really useful one. If you guys haven't heard of this, I invite you to come check out this page, and there's a video at the bottom, or it's described in about 7 minutes. Let's give a quick overview. It's like these two loops refer to these two lines, basically. And this first curve, going from, back in the 1970s or whatever, back in history, the old paradigm. We didn't know we're in an old paradigm until then we get into the 1990s. In the 1990s, we still thought we were just going to keep on going up. Internet's coming. We're very optimistic. It's going to be great. Then 2000 came, internet crashed. 2001 came, the building crashed. Things started going down. Things were a lot worse than what we thought. And then, we kind of, in the 2010s, we kind of fiddled around. Can we go back to the 1990s? We're going to go down. And, things are just like kind of collapsing, right? So what's happened, and people were beginning to do this even back since the 1960s, 1970s, is that, a lot of us imaginal cells, people like in this group, we come out and we actually start experimenting and innovating and talking and thinking about how to create a totally new paradigm, right? Well, this old paradigm's still going, and the thing about this old paradigm too is it's collapsing, but also it's still fulfilling a purpose, because there's still, even the old paradigm systems are still operating, and even though we know they could be way better, in some sense they haven't fully collapsed, and that's a good thing, because they're still allowing us to eat and get health care and send letters back and forth and stuff like this. So there's still some use of this old paradigm, but then what's happening with this kind of dynamic self-organizing group is that we then begin to create the new paradigm. It's already happening gradually. And then as the old paradigm continues to crash, most of the people here just have no clue how to make that transition. And so also we have people who are the bridge builders, who make the bridge between that old paradigm and the new paradigm. Right? And that's the way we do it. So this is a good little map, to kind of just, get the ABCs of what we're actually doing here. The two loops.
Hey, Michael, if I can just make a quick comment on that two loop image while you got it up there. Mm-hmm. An example of the bridge, what comes to mind to me is like, Al Gore investing in these green technologies and all that and making money at it, right? The old paradigm, make money, hoarding, mm-hmm. But it's got the hint of the new. Anyway, back to you. I just wanted to.
Yeah, so there's probably all kinds of different bridge makers too, and maybe even sub loops are in this bridge, loops within loops. Okay, so next one is cataclysm. And here they're just giving a definition of cataclysm, but this one also, this is one of my favorite ones, because this weaves into what we were talking a bit about this last week. My hypothesis, my Gaia hypothesis, is based a lot on cataclysm, and that it's one frame of narrative that we're going into a cataclysm for some reasons. Sometimes that's the way evolution works. That sometimes great change happens when there's first a really great breakdown, and it would be nice to avoid that, and it's possible to avoid that, though I think it's also good to be realistic that in most cases with human individuals, usually when there's a really big change that some individual needs to make, oftentimes it takes a very big breakdown before they're able to really get motivated to make that change. So that's one worth considering. And go back one more thing about this too. In my hypothesis, I propose that humanity's already been through many cataclysms before. Some of them we don't even fully remember in our history. Earth has been just pounded by all kinds of natural cataclysms, and we carry that in our memory. And I think there could be some truth in the fact that the current crisis we're creating may have something to do with basically unresolved unconscious trauma. And speaking about trauma coming into this conversation from before, how can we create a place for our collective to have a space to safely process our very long history of past trauma, so that we don't have to keep repeating it as much, or at least not repeating it unnaturally, like not creating our own crises, for example. And finally, my most favorite, humanity as a superorganism. There is a pattern being uncovered in biological science that reveals the steps by which fragmented pieces of cosmic material coalesce into single cells, which evolve into unified organisms with subsystems that are vital to the well-being of the whole. The next natural step in the development of humanity is to become an increasingly cooperative and dynamically integrated superorganism. That's what we're talking about, collective intelligence.
Woo!
Yeah. So there you have it. Just a quick share of a common resource we all refer to. And now, we can discuss if we like. Any comments, anything at all. I'm totally flexible today. Just take it any direction we like.
Just one quick comment, Michael, that occurs to me. We were talking earlier about, how we're eventually going to kind of do a mitosis thing and splinter into a bunch of different groups working on different aspects. Yeah. But that whole two arcs or whatever, what'd you call it? Not two arcs, but
two loops.
Two loops. Is that could be chunked out. There could be people just studying the past and the previous up through the 90s, and others who study the breakdown, and others who study the bridge, and others who study the beginning from below of the new loop, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, divide and conquer, and then have like a big synthesis meeting, which you might lead, right? Mm-hmm. All right, let's what's the latest that's been uncovered from the different groups that are toiling away, right? I mean, this is collective intelligence. That's what I'm talking about. Anyway, just wanted to put in a little.
Yeah, good idea. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, since I'm moderating here and we talked about like rules and flow and stuff, we're just in open sharing mode right now. So as Michael has invited, just feel free to jump in and question, comment, etc.
Thanks, Michael, for sharing that. And I decided to set up a standing desk too. So while you were talking, I was listening. I was rinsing my sprouts. They didn't get rinsed this morning because I've been busy. So anyway, that's why I was listening, and I really appreciate all that you shared. And something that jumped out at me was, I think it was the word mitosis. Was that the part where before the butterfly is formed, it's just kind of liquid? Is that the name of that?
Well, the word metamorphosis is the whole process.
But that place where it's like liquid, like it's like, oh, what's gonna come out of that? It kind of feels like where we're at.
Yeah.
And we are emerging even in the second. I think Jamin was not afraid to be in the mitosis kind of chaotic stage. There's also the theory, what's that guy who wrote A Path Less Taken, Scott Peck?
The Road Less Traveled, M. Scott Peck.
Yeah, and he talks about how community is first, there's pseudo community. And so we're all nice to each other, we're all getting along, we're singing songs, we're playing the hokey pokey. And then chaos erupts and conflicts come up. And so I feel like that's what happened we had the chaos.
Yeah.
And out of that is emerging authentic community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a similar analogy of we're coming out of that. The beautiful butterfly with 2 wings, we can fly through the air. And I'm done there.
Yeah, great point. So yeah, it happens at all scales. Another mini frame we could probably put in that section of Metamorphosis. One of my favorites is what's it called? It was introduced by Stanislav Grof, he's a famous transpersonal psychologist. The basic perinatal matrices, it's called BPI. It's this 3 or 4 quadrant, just basic archetypal transition. He says it's, across all scales of reality, where there's there's the first state. And getting back to astrological archetypes, we could talk about, it would be Neptune. Things are just perfect. It's the Garden of Eden. It's that first 2 weeks of a new relationship. It's everything's nice and perfect. It's a little perfect pink bubble of love. And then step 2, pop, or crunch. And it goes into what's what we would describe by the planet Saturn, or the archetype of Saturn. It's like the constriction. It's like that would be the baby. The first step is the baby's in the belly inside mom, being fed, just sitting there, floating in the liquid, nothing to worry about. Then birth starts, and it's like death, heat, crunch, crunch coming through the womb. The baby basically thinks it's dying. Does the baby know it's going to come out into planet Earth? Does it? It probably thinks it's dying. It's being crushed. What happened to mom's heaven? That's coming to this hot place. Actually, it's just before that. It starts disconnecting. And then the third stage is the big crunch. And that's the Plutonic archetype, where it is death. It's basically thinking, this is it. I surrender. It's done. I'm going down the tubes. And then boom, out the other side, the Uranian archetype, liberation, whole new world, like way more room than mom's belly, right? Way more space to kick around now, but a little bit sharper edges too. It's just got a lot more. It's just more. It's just like whole different world, And then here we are. Then we think this is it. Oh, now we're here. And then we go to Neo in the Matrix, right? The Neo. It's the same thing. You go to Neo in the Matrix. Same thing. He's in the world. Think this is normal. Oh, now the world is normal. Now this is our little pink bubble. Everything's fine here. I'm so comfortable in this little cubicle in my office job. Oh, hey, take the red pill. Boom, boom, crunch, crunch, crunch. You're dead. Boom, out the other side. Now he's Neo, flying up in the air. Superman, saving the world, sees the code, fighting Agent Smith. He's badass, Uranian. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Every level happened in the Radis meeting last week, probably. It's probably happening right now. Yeah, Stanislav Grof, basic perinatal matrices.
Hey, Michael, Miles.
Hey, Miles.
I watched the recording. I enjoy very much catching up on things I've missed by watching the recording. So I saw your previous presentation. Thank you very much. And you're very interested in psychology, which is something I've recently discovered too in this rabbit hole called YouTube and collective intelligence and such, which the internet provides. And Radish is trying to get things happening so that we have these real conversations and synchronous conversations. And Sheldon Wolin he recently passed away, a sociologist, an American sociologist professor. And Sheldon Wolin said that passivity will be civilization's downfall. And what you just did right now gave me an idea. You presented a website. Now we're talking about it. And I'm thinking maybe this is one way, or perhaps the way, to get people to come over to this conversation, this 24-hour block party, where we actually say, hello, Great Transitions Society or website. Just be aware, these people are gathering together to talk about your website. Yeah, why not? Because I invited my Carl Jung Depth Psychology reading group, and very appreciative that one member did come by last week.
Nice.
Nancy. And now I'm thinking, well, gee, too bad my friend who runs that website didn't find time to get over here to talk to us or join in the block party. But now I'm thinking, if I said, we're going to be talking about your website.
Right. Yeah.
At this hour, during this period of time in the 24-hour block party. And we just go around the world, and everybody can nominate a particular website. And we're going to say, okay, let's talk about that.
Great idea. Yeah.
People are, you're talking about me? Well, I better get in there, find out what's going on. Because there's like so much great stuff out there.
Yeah.
Like the website you just showed us, I added it to my bookmark. And now I've got, I can't even count them, hundreds of great websites talking about all sorts of stuff. But they're just sitting there stagnant. We stir the pot and we get these people, thinking, oh my God, they're talking about my website? Oh, I better get in there and get my colleagues and everybody else involved in this website to drop in and see what these people are going to be saying about our website. So anyway, passivity. We got to somehow unstuck ourselves to get active.
Great idea.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Brilliant, Miles.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oop. Wrong button.
Yeah, great
I
idea.
want to say I have been, did you want to say something, Michael?
No, go ahead.
Well, I've been privately messaging Miles and saying, Miles, can you keep it a little shorter? And I just want to honor Miles because he's doing a great job. I want to nominate him. I want to nominate him for the most improved. But Jamin, you run a close second.
Right, yeah. The Radish Awards.
So, Michael, if you could, because I'm new to Jung,
Yeah.
and I know that I will use names. I'll put names out there to controversial people. I know I'll talk controversial subjects. I'm very open to talking about controversial subjects because when you start to wake up, you realize that curve that you showed, the curve we've been on, it's just full of absurdities, right? And we all of a sudden wake up, such as when Dr. Rao, about a year ago, came on this channel and just started talking about how absurd it is to be eating animals. And to that point in time, I knew a couple of vegans, and I just sort of thought, those people are kind of weird. Like, why would you not enjoy a bacon and tomato sandwich? You know, but then, oh, all of a sudden somebody bursts that bubble, and we're shooken into waking up. And so Jung talked about individuation, and we all have to either get in the game and be active participants in shaping our own lives and bringing forward a message that perhaps only each individual holds, that we have something to say that needs to be put out there. So anyway, talking about Jung apparently gets you in trouble because, as I was going to say, Jordan Peterson, psychologist from the University of Toronto and well-renowned now, but also controversial, he said that anybody talking about Jung in academic circles, invariably it's a career stopper. It's the academia view Jung as almost a flake, I guess, and there's only a few universities that will actually take on or include Jung in detail in their curriculum and the transpersonal side of psychology. So I don't know if you just want to share a little bit more about that, because it doesn't get talked about enough.
Oh man, you're singing my song. I love what you just said, and I love that you asked me to talk about Jung. I love Jung. Jung is, I think I have a list somewhere of like my top heroes, my top favorite characters in history, and Jung might be number one. He's not number one. He's very close to the top. And I studied some Jung. I went to graduate school at the California Institute of Integral Studies, where they totally embrace Jung. And he has one among a very rare amount of universities anywhere that will even include Jung. It's funny how many friends I have who are psychotherapists or counselors, and they've gone to school elsewhere, and most of them have never read Jung, or they weren't encouraged to in their training, which is so sad, I think, because it's just like, it's like night and day. You have the bulk of psychology in the world over here. It's a small little planet, and then you have Jung. It's just this giant, beautiful planet. And yeah, and his I read his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, years ago, and it's such a great story. I mean, this guy, he was a pioneer of the human psyche. You know, his mentor was Freud, and Freud broke through in some, he basically founded modern psychology, but Jung just took what Freud did and just opened the gateway and just let the floodwaters come in, just no limits. And I include a lot of what I've learned about Jung in what I'm working on with Mythic Systems, and orientating around the concept of individuation as a first principle in engendering collective intelligence. Really, I spoke about this last week, that if we're going to have, we already have collective intelligence in the world. It's just how intelligent is it, and what kind of intelligence is it? How do we create more of it, and can we steer it? And it's a big conversation. But I think one of the fundamental principles I propose is that one way is greater intelligence will tend to emerge either by design or also by creating a healthy collective. Just in the same way that if you have a beehive that's sick, then that whole hive is not going to be very intelligent in how it performs and does things. So you got to get the health of that hive good first. So and the health of a hive begins at the individual bee. Get the little bees healthy, and then you have a healthy hive. So and health is a big issue. It's not just about physical health, it's about psychological health. And individuation is essentially the optimal health of an individual, where they've fully integrated who they are across all the full spectrum of what we can be. Yeah, Jordan Peterson too. I like him a lot. I know he's controversial. People people either hate him or they love him. I really like Jordan Peterson. I think has a very fresh voice in today's world, and I like a lot of what he says.
Yeah, and if we talk, if any two people get together long enough, even if they're best buddies, they start talking long enough about deep subjects, there will be a point where they're clashing. But it's that clash, and I think Jung said it, that is where the energy is created. This the clash of opposites, the synthesis that comes out of the thesis and the antithesis. And so that's where this channel is so much potential. And, getting on back to that concept of talking about subjects and particularly websites and sending the invitation out to people, I early on here today, I said, my daughter's 19 years old. She got up, set the alarm for 2 a.m. so she could be there for the release of the BTS #7, I think it's called, album. And she's just one of 80 million young people who are very interested in BTS, but BTS is very interested in Jung, and they're putting out videos and music, all with the theme of the collected works of Carl Jung. And a gentleman named Murray Stein wrote a book some years ago. He's a Jungian analyst, lives currently in Zurich, Switzerland, I believe. And his book, all of a sudden, which was written in 1999, became a huge bestseller just because BTS grabbed onto it, because it's a simple illustration of Jung's work. So anyway, that may be where we really could shake things up on this channel, is to say to youth, and I know Evan and Nolan are very keen on Jung as well. And let's dedicate part of the block party to talking about BTS and Carl Jung and see.
What's BTS?
It's called Blow Up the Stage, or
okay.
It's a Korean pop group, K-pop as it's called. And unless you have a teenager, you probably don't know of BTS, but they're huge, and they're selling out all around the world, 80 million fans at least, and 19 million views on their YouTube just in one day for today. And we want to change the world, and it's probably it will be the young people that will say, okay, obviously what you old folks were doing hasn't worked very well, and we need to do something radically different, and bring all the collective intelligence together and the consciousness raising and these new ways of looking at life through the lens of transpersonal psychology and individuation. Anyway, that's BTS.
And synchronicity, it was Carl Jung who coined the term synchronicity, which he calls an acausal, an acausal meaningful event. Meaning that if you have two events, like one's happening right now, I'll tell you, it's synchronistic. I'm sorry, what's your name again? Miles. It's synchronistic that you're bringing this up, because it was just yesterday that I was on my Audible account looking for some new books. I was like, well, maybe I'll think, what? Oh, Jung. Let me see what they get for Jung. I spent about half an hour looking at Jung books on Audible. I want to get back into Jung. I need to really. There's so much there, And then last night, my girlfriend came over, and we were just sitting there, and she was kind of like looking across the room at my bookshelf, and I said, "Are you looking at the Jung books?" And she's like, "Yeah." And so for the first time in like 3 years, I went over and got this big stack of Jung books and brought it over to her, and we talked about them for a while, including the one I'm intending on reading next is the Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious. So that's synchronistic that just last night, I had two events where Jung was the center topic, and we're bringing it up again today. And Carl Jung coined the word synchronicity. So it's a double synchronicity. It's a hypersynchronicity, I would say. So there's some kind of connection happening there. And I think what you're proposing, that we have a Jung group, is a great idea. I'd love to be a part of that.
Patricia.
I know you said we could just jump in, and I never know, there might be somebody with their hand raised. We can't tell. But anyway, I was just private messaging Melissa, and I said, thanks for bringing up divine intelligence. We talked about that for an hour, and I meant to say the divine feminine, but I wonder if this has something. Then I look back, I go, what? Did I write divine intelligence? Sorry about that. But I'm wondering if Jung brought, I've always liked Jung. I've studied him a little bit, and yet I don't know enough. I'm now inspired to look more deep into that, into his writings. But I'm wondering if he talked about the role of the divine, of a higher power, because synchronicity, to me, it's like, it can be like, the reason it can happen more easily is if we are in tune with the source. And I wake up every morning, I say, because my connection to source is Jesus, and I say, okay, Jesus, I'm here, wherever you want me to go, I'll try to listen. And my ideal is that I'm listening to a higher power, because I believe that there is a source that's not only looking and seeing the big picture, but also helping through people like us who are tuning in. And so if we can all be, what do you think about that idea of synchronicity can happen because we're tuning into a higher power, we're tuning into each other. Our intuition is being utilized, and maybe that's a big part of what our collective intelligence will be. What do you think of that, Michael?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what Jung would say about the divine. I'm sure he does say it. I just don't, it's not referencing in my mind right now, but here's another story about Jung and synchronicity, is that I think one of the first times he really noticed it, that he needed to pay more attention to kind of defining this phenomenon of synchronicity, was he was living in Switzerland, I think, or Geneva, doing his psychotherapy practice, and he had a client come in, like a woman who was very distressed. And she was kind of like this certain kind of personality of just being kind of like really rigid, and she had a lot of change happen in her life, and she was just so resistant against it, and kind of like, she's kind of like lying down on the therapist chair, kind of like, for weeks, just not really doing much, but resist. And she was sharing with you a dream she had had, where in the dream, a golden scarab, a beetle, had come to her in the dream and landed on her hand. And just as she's sharing this to you, Jung hears from across his office some like a sound, and there's some like tapping on the window, and he goes over, and the window there's this beetle, this golden scarab in frickin' Geneva, tapping against the glass. So he opens the window, puts on his hand, and brings it over, and he says, here's your beetle, and shows it to her, and she's just like, she can't believe the acausal meaningful significance of this. What are the chances of that happening? And it kind of shocked her a bit. It kind of brought her into a more expanded state. No one could explain it. Was it a coincidence? Was it the divine? Was it the unconscious psyche? What was it that did that? I would say that in my opinion, that's a certain form of collective intelligence that's already here. There's already this intelligence happening in our reality that's doing things we can't even quite explain with our standard science. But aside from that, considering what's causing that, the fact that it did happen for her influenced her transformational process, because then she's like, wow, she was able to like expand her, go beyond her ego shell and expand into consider that there was something more meaningful going on in her life. And I think that was the beginning of a breakthrough for her. So, in my opinion, I've by the way, I have the domain name synchronicity.net. Synchronicity.net. I've had it for years. It's kind of a side project. I might do something with it someday. I've done some research into synchronicity a bit, and it's not always the case where it's directed like that. There's a lot of different cases where some of the synchronicities happen that they just seem kind of. It's just that, in my opinion, it's the main function of synchronicity is it's us. It's us as the divine. It's us as an inherent, pervasive collective intelligence that goes up and down through consciousness and into our unconscious mind that bridges us all. And that I think one of the main functions is what happened to her. If you ever had a really amazing synchronicity, or sometimes it's like, what? I can't believe that just happened. And it actually changes the state of your consciousness. You'll be just walking down the street, you just had such and such a thing happen, and then all of a sudden this synchronicity happens you can't explain. It's astronomical that this was a coincidence. Amazing. And you just stand there, and your whole state of awareness changes. And all of a sudden you feel more connected to something beyond yourself, some intelligence operating that's beyond yourself. And I think that in some ways, that's the main function of synchronicity as an evolutionary function, is that it kind of comes in sometimes just to keep us moving, to keep our state evolving, to be expansive, more inclusive, that we are and our reality is more than what we think it is.
Beautiful. Melissa, you had a question, comment?
Hi, Michael. Awesome to see you and hear you again. I love all of your stories. They're always very inspiring for me.
Hey, Melissa. Yeah, thanks. Nice tree behind you.
Thank you. The synchronicity, such an interesting subject, and I think the work what I really appreciate about Jung's work is his tapping into the world of symbol and accessing the what we call the subconscious layers through symbol and dreams. And just listening to you now, what was coming to me is that, well, what is really a dreaming state? When we go to bed, are we actually waking up? And when we wake up, are we actually dreaming? Or is it the other way around? And also, I think this thing of synchronicity, where a dream state and what we interpret to be physical reality align that way, really reminds me of the Magical Mystery Tour that we're part of. this sort of dreaming ourselves into existence and the tapping into the consciousness, that overmind, the one mindness of the universe that's creating all of this illusion of reality that we get to interpret and we get to direct if we wake up enough to know that we can direct our play rather than just be kind of random players in it.
Yeah.
And I actively look for those things, because what I find is the more we're in conversation with the world around us, the more it will talk to us. And so I really love that about, waking up into that knowledge, if I could say, or that understanding that synchronicity is at play pretty much all the time. It's just a question, are we awake enough to read those signs and to pick up on that? There's this really incredible museum in LA that I went to, and I'll send you the name of it. It's like the Museum of Jurassic Technology. That's it. The Museum of Jurassic Technology. And it's got these amazing installations. And one of them talks about the brain and the synapses and things that are happening when synchronicity is at play. So I'll see if I can find that for you, Michael, as a reference, because I think you might really enjoy that. And they had all these interesting diagrams about how our brain's functioning when things like that happen.
Great, thanks.
Trish, one thing that I know about Jung is that he talked about the, and I might not be labeling it correctly, but the Christ archetype or the Christ journey. And one of the reasons I think he was very controversial is because he does take on Christianity business as usual, and opens up the possibilities that, Jesus Christ is even bigger than any religion will ever make out of him. And so I mentioned that. And also with respect to the divine feminine, he has the concept of anima and animus. And essentially, I guess, I might not, do it justice, but the typical man has a feminine soul, and the typical woman generally has a male soul. So, the fact that you said that you really feel Jesus is telling you or directing you, that's very much in keeping with him being an archetype of your soul, your animus. Now, again, because there's positives and negatives on the spectrum, from what I understand, and I'm no Jungian analyst, so don't take anything I say for gospel.
Well, I do see that Shiloh wants to hear from Michael, but I will just say briefly. Oh, he wrote something in here that it sounds like she'd like him to talk. But I will just say that I know, as I call myself Christian, because even though ever since I decided to basically surrender my life to Jesus, 19 years ago, I've always felt uncomfortable about the title. I know you really don't like labels, but I'm okay with labels, because what I'm hoping is that I can be part of it inside of Christianity to fan the flames of the changes that are taking place, where people, an increasing number of Christians, are realizing that Jesus was not about creating a religion around, and I do want, I don't talk a lot about my faith, although I like to interject it every once in a while. But I hope that people can see, I'm not here like trying to convert people or change them. And so I really appreciate you coming back to what I said. And that is an interesting idea. That I just really connect with Jesus. It's just ever since I started connecting with Jesus, I've had a stability that I've never had, a peace I've never had. And I also don't feel very comfortable with most Christians because I am so different. At the same time, I'm learning how to interact with them and they're learning how to accept me. So I think that's part of my journey, is to learn that how to just be in any group, and attempt to build bridges and accept people. And so thanks. I really appreciate that, Miles. But I would like to hear, pardon me?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, since, Shiloh, it sounds like she actually wanted, sure. I bet people would enjoy hearing from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to present that again, or just basically. Yeah, thanks for asking, Shiloh. So yeah, my primary brand vehicle is mythicsystems.com. And it's always under development, but there's particularly 3 projects I'm working on now. I've been working on for a while, and they're really close to emerging. One is the Evolutionary Entrepreneurial Education Program, which is not really on that website yet, but a subset of that is something called the Mythic Path program, which I'm working on now. I'm actually going to be doing a test of the workshop Saturday and Sunday this weekend, and then I'm planning on rolling that out publicly in March. And basically the Mythic Path program is a lot about what we're just talking about the process of individuation. So it's pulling in a lot of different resources and a lot of different modalities, and basically helping people. And I'm primarily targeting the younger generations. Anyone's welcome, but I agree. I see that the younger generations, particularly the millennials, they're our best shot, and they're the ones that we really want to help the most, because they're full of energy and they're just looking for wisdom and clarity to really continue with the work we've already been doing and carry that over the hump in the next couple of decades. So the Mythic Path program is primarily dedicated towards them, in helping them just really become more clear in who they are in their lives, and then make something of a plan for what they want to do now and a strategy for doing that. That's what I call an evolutionary entrepreneur, but it's in this context of first really helping them go deeper in individuating, like deeply as possible, not just becoming another financial consultant, unless that's really what their soul wants to do. If their soul really wants to become a financial consultant, fine. But let's go through a proper process of really helping people really understand what their soul blueprint is, and then from that space we can then transcend our stories and just really be who we are, and everyone's then very well individuated, doing what they most love to do. So there's a lot more energy behind it. So that's the Mythic Path program. And then interrelated with that is a project called Mythos, which is the Mythic operating system, and that's a network application, that a community application that's designed with specific technology, very new paradigm network technology. So it's, all really open data, designed in all the best ways that a social network should be. And then that will be about a place for people to continue that process in a really open format of basically, sharing their stories of personal transformation with others to essentially to develop empathy with each other. I see a lot more opportunity in our social networks today, much like what we're doing here, but even more specific towards story itself. I see the opportunity that we kind of lost story in social media. Like we're in information overload, and that's not to say all the information is bad. I go to Facebook. I really value Facebook for a lot of reasons, but it's a different thing to essentially return to the campfire, as I say it. Go back to our roots of the way we used to connect with each other. The most essential way we can connect with each other is by sharing our personal stories, in particular, our most personal stories of transformation. And this is the most natural way we connect with each other. It's the most natural way we share knowledge and wisdom. And it weaves empathy and deeper connection with each other. And so that's another way of cohering our collective intelligence. And then from sharing our personal stories of transformation, we can then more efficiently weave together whatever our collective story is, both backward and forward, both processing the story we've lived in the past. I think that's also an essential part of it. We need to really integrate what we've just been through. In the best case scenario, if we're going to pop out in the next couple of decades into a whole new world, it's just bright and shiny and we've made it. Part of that process too is understanding what we just did. And giving meaning to that there's actually some meaning to what's happened in the last decades and centuries in our really kind of like bumpy road of human history, and also creating our story forward of where do we want to go as a collective. There might be multiple paths, but getting that as clear as possible. So the Mythos platform is designed to do that, and both these things, the Mythic Path program and Mythos, work together in that way. So the program is more like a one-on-one, no technology needed necessarily, human workshop, and then Mythos is the technology that scales that out basically and enhances it. So, and I'm also working on a book that goes with Mythos, and I got some great stuff there happening. I've been writing this for years, and I think I can get a version out this year. So I'm super excited about what I'm working on there, and thanks for asking. And keep an eye on Mythic Systems. There's a newsletter, so sign up if you like, and I'll be back here to let you know when things are launching.
Love it. I really love that you're working on a Mythic operating system, if I'm paraphrasing that right. Because the way I see what we're doing here with Radish, which you're a part of, Michael, and with Block Party, is in the broadest general terms, we're creating an operating system for collective humanity, right? Oh, you want to be part of the collective? Boom, plug in here. Start here, whether you're talking in a conversation like this one and the AI is listening, or you're talking one-on-one with a bot and saying, this is all about me, and here's my resume, and here's everything Again, the bot digests it all and says, you should try this conversation over here, for example, or read this first and then jump into that conversation, etc. And the Mythic operating system, I think, can just totally integrate with that. It's like, well, what's your path? Where are you now? Oh, you are here? Oh, and you want to go there? Oh, okay. Well, you're about to head out on the journey of separation, a walkabout of self-discovery. Great. Here's all these great resources, other journeys that others have taken. And here's these conversations of other folks who are about to take off on the launching pad. It's
That's right. Yeah, I do. I see it as all interoperable.
I'd like to, one of the things I'd like to share, I've thought of this before, but now seems a good time to bring it up, because I know you've been working very hard with the Radish team to pull together the Radish platform. And one of the concepts that occurred to me that the platform would be really quite possibly tremendous for is the preservation of language. And one of the my personal focus is learning more about the Indigenous peoples of Canada. And there's in 2015 we had what's called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. And one of the calls to action of the 94 calls to action is about language. And it's call to action number 14. It says, we call upon the federal government to enact an Aboriginal Languages Act that incorporates the following principles. Number one, Aboriginal languages are a fundamental and valued element of Canadian culture and society, and there is an urgency to preserve them. And Aboriginal language rights are reinforced in the treaties. Number three, the federal government has a responsibility to provide sufficient funds for Aboriginal language revitalization and preservation. And my thought is that what you're working on, this having the Zoom conferences and then the transcriptions, the recordings are archived in conversations. Those conversations would be these stories that you're referring to, for example. And it'd be amazing to see this platform being used to preserve and teach these languages, because you could simply, approach, I'm thinking, the federal government here in Canada and say, well, we're working on this platform and we think there's maybe something that could be used for the First Nations of Canada, because there's about 20 individual, very separate language sets. And then there's dialects within those. And collective intelligence, as you guys know, is very much ingrained in language. And if we just restrict ourselves to English, we're missing out on an amazing amount of wisdom and different ways of seeing the world. So,
excuse me if I'm interrupting, but I'm reminded of what, who was the guy that was on last week from Tokyo, Japan?
Sanjay.
Yeah. Maybe you must have watched that, Miles. Did you watch the recording? Yeah, we talked about the Japanese language in that context.
Right, and I was, he made me really stop to think about this word intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, we have to remember it's information. And the more we get information and each of us processes it within our own context and our own life experience and history, that intelligence, that information starts to fire new ideas, right? New wisdoms. And that's what you're all about, right? Radical collective intelligence.
Beautiful. Patricia, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I was thinking that really we're pretty seriously considering having a base camp project management system on Radish. And really, it's interesting that in there, you can have unlimited participants, which is pretty amazing, for $99 a month. You can have 1 million, I guess. I don't know if anybody's ever pushed the envelope, but I'm just seeing that on the Vegan World 2026, the base camp, where there's all these groups, there's all this communication going on. I chose to be on every single group. I get maybe 100 emails a day from everybody who's talking. And most people would get overwhelmed with that. But I like to know the big picture, and I just scan things. And then there's individual messages that I'm getting from people. And I just can't believe how much collective intelligence is being gathered there, because it's all like emails. Instead of emailing each other, we go through this message system where the whole thread is preserved on the little project management system that's just for a team or a project. And so I'd really love to have a conversation with Basecamp founders and asked them, how can we make this even more connected? And the interesting thing is, they have one part. There's 6 parts for each of, like, a project or a team will have the same 6 sections. And the first one is a campfire. They call it a campfire.
Yeah.
And so if you post on the campfire, it'll go out to everybody in that project. So it doesn't overwhelm the whole, everybody who's on the, like, I don't know, there's 330 people on the base camp. So I think it's interesting that they chose that name, that they knew that there just needed to be a place just to share whatever and not feel limited. And so I think they're on the same page. I really love them.
Michael actually set up a base camp for Radish a couple years back, but then we weren't using it enough.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we used it. I think we had it for about a year or two, because we were primarily using it for the development of the current conversations application prototype. And it was useful for that. But it was mostly 3 people that were on there. And then we, maybe like 6 months ago or something, we weren't using it anymore, so we shut it down. But yeah, maybe, maybe we can find a use for it again.
I think so, because Patricia is interested in getting really, I mean, she's just all over Basecamp, so it's like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah, I like Basecamp too. I've used it for a lot of projects.
A Basecamp where we invited literally anyone and everyone who is interested in participating from Block Party. It's like, hey, the party continues on Basecamp, right? There's always somebody at the campfire. Patricia!
Yeah, I want to get to a place where I don't sleep. And I know that the base camp wasn't really working that well until Ray was hired to kind of help people get more connected. And I think it does take a facilitator and also a plan, which I have ideas like open space technology where people, and co-working space, and somebody can start a group and start. Yeah, so I'm developing ideas, and I'm glad that you're familiar with Basecamp. Yeah, I guess I love what's happening on Vegan World 2026. I'm very impressed. And then the beautiful thing is that if we have the Vegan World 2026 it's more for vegans, and I invite people who aren't vegans. Hey, come on over. And they kind of go, ooh, I'm not quite sure about that. But if we had some place where people could keep the conversation going, I really think that's the beginning of collective intelligence propagating even more than this. But this is great.
Yeah, I love all the ideas that are bubbling up. Miles's idea from earlier, the Basecamp idea, we've been talking for months now about kind of integrating with Reddit. We have a great video, post it up on Reddit, start a new thread, people watch the video, they start commenting on it, etc. That kind of opens it up to the broader world. Basecamp is more people who are just like in this particular community. So there's all these different variants, and anyway, this can be a conversation we can have next about radical collective intelligence. I don't want to take us away from this present conversation, but it really is all integrated, right? It is all one big whole that we're creating here.
Yeah, I would say the word intelligence was bothering me a little while ago, because I didn't really understand it as just information, because I was thinking of it more narrowly defined as intelligence, as being smart, and not necessarily incorporating wisdom, because wisdom, someone said, wisdom is knowledge combined with love, or information combined with love. But now that, Sanjay mentioned, well, intelligence is just information. So it's information about anything. It's information about the divine feminine. It's information about Sophia, feminine, the philosophy of wisdom. It's culture. It's the way we do things. So
I'm trying to remember the way he framed it, because I don't know if I agree with what he's saying, but I'm trying to remember that he did have a little model. He said intelligence is information, and then he had a second part. And he kind of built on that. I'm trying to remember what that was. It's like, if intelligence is information, then something greater. Does anyone remember what he said?
I just remember him saying intelligence is unknown as well, because you don't necessarily know what you have for a while. You might have collected the intelligence, like, where we've talked about sociocracy, and that's a way of doing something that has a whole, maybe books and YouTube videos about it. So a person encounters this word sociocracy, like it's fairly new to me. And it's like, okay, where's that? What's that all about? I wonder, But so the intelligence is sort of encapsulated in that word, but there's a lot behind it. You don't really know what you're dealing with for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's maybe, I just remember him also saying that it's sort of also the unknown quite possibly. You have the intelligence, but you don't know it. Mm-hmm. Really what its potential is.
Mm-hmm. Melissa, you got your hand up.
Excuse me. Yeah, Michael, I have a question for you. I just wanted to ground us out of our headspace and down into our bellies and into our feet, and connect and root back into Mother Earth. And one of the things I just wanted to ask you is, in your course, which I love this idea, it's so beautiful, I can't wait to hear more about it, with youth and millennials, is will you have the intention of helping them grow empathy through understanding their connection to the animals and the plants that we inhabit this earth with? And I'm just thinking of First Nations people, that they never see themselves as individuals separate from the rest of the living beings. And so you have plans, as you know, probably connected to the killer whales, connected to raven, connected to all these different animals. And they wear their images on their dance blankets, which talks about their totems, their connection. And I think that that many of us have lost that connection. And until we can get back into that connection, we won't understand that we are all one family, and then we cannot grow empathy, and therefore we cannot heal this planet. So I just think that's really an important aspect, the tree of life, and understanding about change, that change is a constant on the planet, things growing and things falling apart, this constant cycling of up and down.
Yeah.
And how do we, there's the seen world and the unseen world, and both are real, and both have laws that govern them. Mm-hmm. And how do we fit into that? What is our relationship with those?
Yeah. I have thought about this, and I am planning on it. So I'm not going to give away too much about what I'm working on, but the first program, the Mythic Path program, is the first of 3 large modules that encompass what I call the Evolutionary Entrepreneur Program. And I've thought a lot about this over many years, but the Mythic Path program begins mostly with stories. So these 3 steps is story, state, and strategy. And so Mythic Path is all about story, beginning with where people are at. I agree with you, but before before we have people connecting with their external environment, first we want to see how if they can individuate themselves, get fully connected with themselves first. If we're fully connected with ourselves, or it's an ongoing process, but that we're like crystal gems, so to speak. The brighter and clearer and more polished we are as crystal gems, then the more we're going to resonate with each other and the more we're going to connect with the outer world. So some people are in such a state of confusion about who they are that's what's getting in the way of them connecting to anything else. So that's where, in my opinion, we want to start there, start with the individual, start with their stories of their life, the connectivity that's brought them through time with themselves, with their life. Get that clear. Let's connect the dots there. And then the second program is based on the concept of state. So it's story, state, and strategy. And state, yeah, it's exactly that. The story is all about what's seen. What have you seen in your life, and what do you see going forward? What do you see? Right? State is the unseen. It's all about forget story now. Let's transcend story. Now that you think you know who you are, let's go deeper and let's really get in our bodies and let's see if we can see the unseen. So that's where I would go next. Yeah. Thanks for asking. It's totally relevant. Critical. And yeah, I love the tree behind you. What's the story behind that tree behind you, Melissa?
These are panels for Shakespeare's Tempest.
Mm.
And it's a peacock sitting in the tree, because part of the story of the Tempest takes place on an island in a forest where the ship is wrecked. And so these are just 2 panels that I created for that, for the island's production of the Tempest. And it's just showing paradise, basically.
Yeah. Cool. I love it. Beautiful.
Yeah, I just wanted, yeah, it is beautiful. I really want to get some prettier backgrounds in my white walls. But I was wondering, Michael, it's fun. Would you be willing? We have about, let's see, we're going to take a break at 10 till, I think, or do we take a break at 6? I mean, are we going to take a break at 10 till, Jamin?
It could be 10 till, it could be top of the hour. It could even be after. I mean, it'll be around 4 o'clock.
Okay, well, we don't have a lot of time left. I just wonder if you might be willing to lead us in some kind of experiential thing that could get us into a space that is connecting. I don't know, do something that you do. Like, would you give us a sample? Would you be willing to do that?
Let me think about that for a second. My mind's a little blank right now. I mean, I have several exercises, but most of them are fairly large and would be a little more time consuming, I think.
Well,
but, Yeah,
Well,
Jamie.
I have a thought is that we could just do like a co-creative story where each of us says something for maximum 10 seconds and then somebody else builds off of that, just
Mhm.
create a new story for humanity.
Cool. Okay, let's try it.
All right. Michael, you want to start?
Once upon a time.
There was a species.
Not
And
so
they were in a lot of pain.
I missed what you said, Patricia. What was that?
And they were in a lot of pain.
Mhm.
And they discovered a golden egg.
Mhm.
And they fought over that egg. Mine.
And the egg fell through the air.
But one person caught it just in time.
Melissa.
And then it dropped and fell to the earth and hatched open, and the roots of a beautiful sapling planted themselves into the earth.
And the tree had so many branches
That many birds could sit on them and bring music back into the world.
And we all sat on the branches, all the people here, we were sitting on the branches. And then Miles said,
It was the tree of peace.
because there was a place for everyone to sit and rest.
And then the tree grew flowers. And then the flowers bore fruit. And then the fruit fell to the earth.
And brought great wealth to the beautiful tree of life.
and the animals actually sprung from the fruit and they all got along.
And there was a bird named Trish who sang a song.
With two wings, we can fly through the air. With two wings, we can go most anywhere. With two wings, we can fly over the earth. With two wings, we can make peace. All the birds flew all around, dropping seeds of love.
Nice.
Yay. The end. And they lived happily ever after.
Yes, yes.
Now you see how fun and easy that was?
It was super easy.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamin.
Now look, you see how we all co-created that. So I think I made this comment last week when humanity first saw the Earth from space, Gaia looking at herself for the first time. As I look at all of us, I'm seeing my bigger self for the first time. When I look in the bathroom mirror, I just see this hairy, overweight dude, right? But when I look at all of us, I see such beauty. The bigger us.
Hey, I love it, Jamin. And you just reminded me. Because
Yeah.
when Patricia asked me to share an exercise, there was something, I was like, God, there's something I was thinking could be cool, like a short one. And then whatever you said, Jamin, just totally reminded me of what it is. And it's just something I did yesterday where I haven't done this before actually. And it can be just done really quick. Where I went and looked on Wikipedia, I looked for my birthday on Wikipedia, May 3rd, 1970 on Wikipedia. And then it gives you a list of what happened in that month. And so I can go to my birthday on May 3rd, and there's a page for my birthday. And it says, actually, I didn't do this for myself, I did it for another person, but now it says, May 3rd, Blessed Leonardo Moraldo of Turin, a 19th century advocate in Italy for labor reform. Okay, not that exciting. But sometimes really cool things come up. Does anyone know, has anyone done this for your birthday? Have you looked at your birthday and seen weather kind of cool events? Jamie, I have a feeling that you might have a cool event. So what year were you?
The only
May
thing
5th.
I've ever
May 5th,
Yeah.
1968.
68. May 5th?
Yep.
No, for some reason, Wikipedia is not bringing that one up.
Your birthday doesn't exist.
The only thing that happened on that day was Jamin was born. Other than that, there's nothing happened.
Yes, the page May 5th, 1960 does not exist. You can ask for it to be created. So go create it, Jamin.
Okay.
So I remember, I had, what I'd done yesterday is I was imagining what day I was conceived, right? Which I don't know for sure, but that would be approximately 9 months before my birthday, which if you got it exact, that would be early August of 1969. So I went and looked at what was happening in early August of 1969. And what I discovered is that was just after the Apollo moon landing, basically. They had just flown to the moon, landed, walked around, and they just came back and had splashdown. And then maybe a week went by, and then I was probably conceived, right? And then the next week after that were the Charles Manson Tate murders. Just kind of interesting to think about, what was happening in the world when we were born, and what was maybe happening in the world from the time were conceived and the whole time we were in our mother's belly during those oh so sensitive gestation times, and how that might influence, those stories and those historical events, how that might influence who we are today. So go check it out, folks, if you like. Wikipedia. Yeah, Patricia. You're on mute. You're on mute still.
Okay. Well, I looked up my birthday and I found out that actually it was not the same year, but August 23rd, slavery was abolished.
Woohoo!
I'm not sure where. But during that year, 1954, August 23rd, Eisenhower was the president, and I think he was a pretty peaceful president. He said if we would just have bake sales instead of bomb, have bake sales instead of bombs. He said some pretty wise things. I think so. Eisenhower was around, and so thanks. That's a really neat idea.
Yeah.
Well, do you know why the rock group U2 is called U2?
Wasn't that a bomber plane?
Yeah, and that bomber, that spy plane was shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960. And I believe at least a couple of them, and Bono for sure was born in 1960. And for whatever reason, they needed a name for their group, so they picked U2 from the spy plane.
Oh, someone here is May 2nd. Who's that? Emery? So we got May 3rd. I'm May 3rd, May 2nd, and May 5th. It's Jamin. Lots of May babies.
All Tori.
Yeah. Love Tori.
What did you say?
I love Tori.
Taurus.
Yeah.
Oh,
Taurus.
Taurus.
I said they're all Taurus.
Yeah, I didn't know the plural of Taurus. I'm a double Leo.
Tori. But I don't know.
You know, I love the silence. Sorry to break it, but what it, you know, what it kind of represents to me is, I remember I was once holding this little tiny kitten. It was like crawling, just the tiniest little baby kitten. And, you know, I'm kind of stroking it and playing, it's climbing all over me. And then, you know, at one point I'm saying something and I look down and I see the little kitten's like looking up at me like this, like just this sudden realization, right? Like looking me in the eyes, like realizing, oh, you know, like this thing isn't just like a moving tree. It's like another creature like me. I'm just imagining what might have been going through its head. But when I see our silence and we're just like, oh, I feel like we're that little kitten, not the individuals, but the big us, the collective. We're just waking up as a collective and going, huh. Kind of like what Michael was talking about earlier about going through the birth canal. And it's like, oh, we're just getting to know ourselves as a collective for the first time. And consider this, Zoom is like the womb. Why? Because it's not like the real world where we're some physical place, all right, and who's going to pick up the check and, you know, da-da-da-da-da, and all this kind of stuff. And then I got to drive somewhere and emit a bunch of hydrocarbons. We're just here in this Zoom cloud, womb cloud. Sounds like the beginning of a song. Anyway,
I thought you were going to rap there for a second. Rhyming.
Well, I think, Jamin, there have been collective intelligences before. If you think of First Nations, they function as a family, as a collective. Who knows about ancient civilizations? They certainly had knowledge way beyond our comprehension of the cosmos, and, you know, built the pyramids in Egypt. So that would have taken collective super intelligence to build those. But what I find fascinating is it's the first time globally that we have a collective where across cultures, across genders, across age, we're a collective. And that, you know, youth are looking to elders for wisdom again, but also we as elders and young elders are looking to youth for wisdom. It's not just in one direction. And that's what I find really fascinating, is that everything's kind of been spun round willy-nilly, higgledy-piggledy, and, you know, we're coming up right in this new story that we haven't seen before, really, on this global scale, because we were all separated before.
Yeah, the way I look at it is maybe getting back to, I wonder if this relates to what you were saying, Michael, about the different stages, but because sometimes we look at the indigenous people or with these little villages, everybody get, you know, they get along, they have their customs, they have they're so connected to nature, and that's beautiful. And yet what you said, Melissa, I just really resonate with, because we are creating more of a way for us each to be individuals. We don't have to feel the peer pressure of being like everyone else, and therefore our full creativity can emerge because we're not trying to fit in. And I think that is something I love about brainstorming, is because people throw out the ideas. They can be as silly or You know, like I always like to start a brainstorming session like, well, the aliens from Mars came and helped us do this, or, you know, we had a sky hook come out from the sky, or, you know, just we can be, and we need to take that brainstorming energy into, we're doing that. We're starting to take that creative, playful, not needing to fit in, yet we do fit in. I'm wondering if somebody could tell me what they understood me to say just now, because I'm not sure exactly what I said.
Sounded to me like you're talking about collective intelligence emerging from nowhere.
And I also heard that you can just be totally open, coming from outer space. So you're not like constrained. Okay, here we are in this garage. What are the tools that we have and how do we do things? No. Oh, wow, this thing came from outer space and you know. So it just like opens it up. I just see that as a cracking open of the universe of possibility. And something you just said about that, Patricia, makes me think that, see, we were talking about other collective intelligences in the past, even collective superintelligences like that built the pyramids and all kinds of stuff. But what's interesting about those is those existed at the same place at the same time. Here, we're existing at the same time, but all these different places. See, if we were hanging with Michael in Mount Shasta, we'd be having a Mount Shasta experience. But what we're having right now is just this vegan Hungarian goulash with all these different ingredients piled on from all these different places, right? And so there is no one physical place that this is a conversation at that place. No, it's happening at a bunch of different places. And that's really
I think that is how consciousness operates. And if you look across civilization, when the pyramids were being built in other civilizations, very similar things were happening. And how do you explain that? You know, if you go to what they call the runways, you know, in South America, where they think aliens landed, those huge carvings, you know, those are happening at the same time as temples are being built in other cultures thousands of miles away that have actually no physical evidence of their existence. But there's this collective consciousness where ideas are coming from spirit into us and operating through us. It's not just the human mind that's creating these or the human imagination. It's our connection to the one mind, to the overconsciousness, which evolve. I mean, we're seeing it now, only we're aware of it individually because we have internet, which allows us to talk about it.
So here's an analogy for you. Imagine that pre-internet, all the stuff that was happening, let's just call that like analogous to language. There's all this buzzing, it's happening, it's real. And then writing came along. This for us is like the writing because it's being recorded. It'll be transcribed. It's being broadcast, right? So it's like a dimensional enhancement on this connectivity that's already there, to your point, Melissa. It's already happening synchronistically, you know, synchronously all around the world, but now we're actually able to articulate it and capture it, not just in text, but in video and audio recordings, which is just insanely rich.
Also, I think we're trying to come into consciousness, a state of being awake, where we're consciously now making different kinds of choices that are not just about our individual selves and our individual well-being, but about the health of an entire planet. And I think that's very different.
I think we're discovering that we can have the same values of caring for the earth, being compassionate to each other. I think it's a value that we look beyond that. The thing you've said many times, Jamin, is we think somebody else is going to solve the problem. That's a value. And so treating each other with respect. So I think when we come together with these values, we can be really diverse. We can have different spiritual paths. We can live in different places. We can have different jobs, but that's what I think having conflicts will arise when we aren't really sharing the same values, and I think our values are emerging, which I believe are universal values. They're universal laws. It's a universal, the golden rule. So I appreciate that Michael came to help facilitate this conversation very much.
Thank you, Patricia. Yeah, thanks again for inviting me.
I don't know how much time you have, Michael, but you mentioned one of the books you've read was Memories, Dreams, and Reflections of Carl Jung.
Yeah, that's actually,
And
it's an autobiography, I believe.
yeah, an autobiography. It was a autobiography, but with a woman who was very close to him, helping him edit it.
Marie von Franz, maybe.
Someone perhaps.
Mhm.
But coincidentally, or I don't know if we'll stretch it to synchronicity, I read that book myself and I took some notes. And one of the notes that I made that really struck me was the section on his travels, where he wrote about his visit to the Pueblo Indians.
Mm-hmm.
And if everybody's in agreement, I could read a little bit of this. I don't want to take too much time, though.
I actually do need to get going. I would love to hear that. And I love this idea of bringing you more into these conversations. And so
thanks, Michael. Excellent work you're doing.
Miles. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to get going. I have a lot of preparation to do before tomorrow.
Sure.
Best wishes.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Yeah.
Goodbye, farewell, and good night, goodbye.
And keep coming back, Michael. Again.
I will. See you next week.
For songs like that.
Yeah. Okay, bye, Ryan. Have a nice day. Talk with you soon.
Cool. See ya.
Bye-bye.
All righty. Well, that was super cool. I mean, we could, if there's still ideas flowing, this is.
I think it's a good time for a break.
Sure. Well, let me just, so we'll take a break. I just want to leave everybody with one thought. When one person sits down and thinks, maybe they think for half an hour. When two people get together to have a conversation, maybe they talk for a couple hours. When humanity comes together to talk, we talk for 24 hours. This is the collective consciousness, super intelligence, spirit. And upon that deep thought,
we'll have to create a Jamin bot, batteries that are rechargeable, so that you can occasionally take a break.
Well,
I can just pop in and out. We can all just pop in and out.
I've got ideas about that. We'll share later.
just don't make him inflatable.
No, we'll make you out of fiberglass.
No, one of those, those things, and they jump, those little guys.
A bobblehead.
Yeah.
Oh God, a Jamin bobblehead. Hey, we should market those.
We'll make $1 million. We'll make $1 million.
Well, we got a prototype right here. I can go down to First Avenue and try my luck. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so.
All right. Family friendly.
Pardon me?
That was a good laugh. Thank you,
Right.
Melissa.
So, how much of a break do we want? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? I'm kind of thinking 15. It's once every, once every 2. Yeah, so 15. Okay. So we'll all meet back here at 1/4 after. I will stop recording. So then we'll start a new recording. People can keep hanging. People can keep talking. Feel free. Please note, we are live streaming. So even when we stop recording, we're still live streaming. Okay. Stopping recording in 3, 1.